Hi, friend. Shereese here. And today, we see Troi go through all 5 stages of grief. We discover that horses run into burning barns, and we ask the question, why the F did it take Troi 4 hours to walk from the ready room to the observation lounge? Stay tuned to find out. Welcome to the TNG Podcast, the #1 place in the Alpha Quadrant to geek out about all things Star Trek: The Next Generation. I'm your co-host, Shereese.
I'm your co-host, Andrea. Today, we're talking Season 4, Episode 10, The Loss. This episode was written by Alan J. Alda and Vanessa Green and directed by Chip Chalmers. Shereese, are you ready for this?
I'm ready.
Traveling through deep space, the Enterprise stops to investigate an odd phenomenon of phantom sensor readings. Deanna Troi experiences pain and loses consciousness as her empathic abilities suddenly cease to work. The crew discovers that they cannot resume course as the Enterprise is caught in a group of 2-dimensional life forms. And without her powers, Troi suffers a tremendous sense of loss and goes through several of the classic psychological stages, including denial, fear, and anger. Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, so...
I mean, I feel like that was maybe the whole episode. I just gave you the whole episode
that
right
was
there.
Literally the whole episode. I was like, maybe she's not going to talk about the life forms. Oh, there it is. Well, okay. The only other thing probably in this episode that we didn't mention was the cosmic string.
Yes.
Which was like the life-threatening moment in this episode. But so my initial thoughts on this was I usually skip this one because it's a Troi heavy episode and she is my least favorite crew member. Not the actress's fault, but I'm going to blame the writers. The way they wrote this character, I just don't, she's my least favorite character. So whenever I see a Troi heavy episode, I'm like, next, no, don't need that one. So I haven't seen this episode in forever. I didn't know what it was about, except for it was about Troi. So I was like, but I know you were excited, Andrea, about watching this one. So I thought, I'll give it a chance because I also skipped the episode with Beverly from a couple
Remember
weeks ago. Yeah, I always skip that one as well. And I actually really liked that. It was a fun little mystery. So I was like, maybe this is going to surprise me. And I'm actually going to be like, oh man, this episode's really good. That's not what happened though.
Oh no.
No, but those are my initial thoughts. I was like, okay, like I'm totally going to give this Troi episode a chance.
Okay. See, our listeners are listening to us, as a podcast, so they can't see your face, but guys, let me just fill you in. Shereese was like smiling the whole time. And then her face got dead serious. And she's like, but that's not what happened. You were like smiling. And suddenly it was like angry face.
Angry face. That's my regular face. But what were your initial thoughts as this episode was kind of starting?
I usually side with you on the Troi thing where I'm like, it's a Troi episode. It's not really my favorite, but this is honestly the first place in TNG that I actively like Troi. It's the first time I actively like her. I actively disliked her, as many of you will remember. And then I actively, passively just like accepted that she was there. She was just sort of like a houseplant. Like you're there, but like this episode, I really like her a lot. And there's a couple of thoughts that I had about this episode that I want to share. And one that like I got actually doing some research. Rick Berman, who was one of the main showrunners or producers, wrote, and I got this from my book, Captain's Logs. He said, quote, I pushed for this episode a lot. It was fascinating to me that someone would lose one of their senses and be unable to explain it to others because they didn't have it in the first place. If you were the only sighted person in a colony of blind people and suddenly lost your vision, and they all said, so what? Like, this is what this episode was. And I was like, oh, that's really, really interesting because there's nobody else on the ship is an empath. So they're all like, well, this is what our regular life is like. And we get along just fine. But yeah, you're right. Like it's trying to explain to a person who was born blind how important it is for you or how devastating it might be to lose, have your vision and then lose it. Where they're like, oh, this is just what my regular life is like. I like this episode also because we have some conflict between characters. Like Troi loses her shit on Beverly and screams at her. And on
Riker and on pretty much everyone.
On everyone. And I felt for her because I was like, yeah, I would feel the same way. And also as an outsider, I'm like, I see how you felt that way. And also that was wildly uncool to talk to these people like that. But like, we're kind of on both sides. It's like, we understand why Troi is feeling this way, but we also get like, it's not Beverly's fault that this has happened to her. So you know how Jean was always like, no conflict. Right. I loved that we had like this is what real psychological like progression through a loss is like. And I really appreciated that.
I kind of felt as I was watching this episode, I kind of felt like, wow, I know why Andrea liked this because, and this is not an insult, but you're like Troi, not in the ways of being like a, kind of an airheaded plant on the side of the road, but in the sense that you are very emotionally intelligent. And I won't go as far as saying empathic because I'm not woo-woo like that, but you're very emotionally intelligent. Like you're very aware of people's emotions, much more so than the average person, I think.
Oh, thank
you.
So
you're welcome. So as I was watching, I was like, I can see why Andrea would resonate with this because this is kind of Andrea. Like this episode is kind of all about Andrea and like her journey through life. And other people being like, what's your problem? And you being like, don't you see what, like, there's emotions here. And people are like, no emotions for me. I don't know what you're talking about. No emotions whatsoever.
I feel like you're describing my current life right now.
I'm describing our friendship. I'm describing like you being like, I have emotions and me being like, what are those?
Describe them to me.
Yes, exactly. So I could see why you would like this episode. And I could also see why I wouldn't, right? Because it's something I don't resonate with. It's something that doesn't naturally click for me. It's something that I don't walk through my life feeling my way through situations and people. I use like, logic more than emotions. Not because it's better or worse, but just because it's easier for me. It's like it's a lot safer and more natural for me. So I totally was thinking that though, as I was watching, I was like, yeah, I could see why Andrea would be like, oh man, like I feel for Troi. And I didn't feel for Troi. Like I wanted to feel for Troi, but I didn't because I was just like, what's her problem? Like, I know she was sad and going through grief, but I was just like, she's just being such a dick.
And I'm like, this poor woman.
Exactly. And I was like, girl, maybe you just need to be in your quarters for a minute. Cause like, you don't need to be going anywhere on this ship right now.
I'm like, I need a chocolate sundae right now. See, I would say, I mean, I don't think I'm an empath because that's not an actual thing, but I will say, I think I'm very, very empathetic towards people, and really try to, see where the other person is coming from. And I think that that's something I'm really good at. Although if you listen to this podcast a lot, that might be surprising to you because I'm usually such an asshole about so many of these characters. I'm like, what a dick. But actually in my real life, away from the microphone, I'm actually a very sweet person.
I, on the other hand, am exactly the way I sound on the microphone.
You are. You know what? You are dyed in the wool through and through the way you are. This is just a great outlet for me to like bitch and complain about some, Aldebaran wine not being the right temperature or whatever the hell we're complaining about. Anyway, all right, let's jump into this episode. So this is one of the first times that we actually see Counselor Troi not just being like the captain's private counselor, but like the ship's counselor.
I think this is only the second time we see her office, right? The first time was with Barclay. So.
Yes, I think you're right. And actually, I really, really loved this opening scene because Deanna is just being a very empathetic counselor. And she's talking to this woman, Ensign Brooks, whose husband died in some sort of accident just a few months ago. And this woman is in complete denial. She's like,
the happiest denial ever.
Oh my God. Well, that's what denial is. Isn't it a wonderful place to be? Don't we wish we could live there? I mean, she hasn't missed an hour of her duties. Her language skills are improving. She's volunteered more hours than ever at the nursery. And she's like, I guess I'm just better at it than others.
Like better at dealing with grief. Yeah. Yes. I'm just so great at it.
Yeah. She's like, some of us may not be dealing with it at all, as a matter of fact. And dealing with great loss can be extremely painful, and not feeling it and being stuck in denial creates so much more pain in the future because you cannot live in denial forever. So at some point it's going to
hit
come
you
rushing in. It's going to. And I thought, oh my God, this is such a great and gentle way. Like Counselor Troi, I think she is a great ship's counselor in this instance where she's very gently sort of like leading this woman to be like, so are you dealing with your pain?
This woman is like, I don't know what you're talking about. And then she kind of breaks. She kind of eventually like the floodgates open and she just like loses it in grief and sadness. And she's just like, you know what? I woke up for the first time. I think her husband's birthday was like yesterday or something like that.
I think it was today. It was supposed to be today was going to be his 30th birthday, which I was like 38. Oh my God, that's so young.
It's so young. And so she was just like, when I woke up, I realized that he wasn't there for the first time since the accident, since he died. It was like suddenly she realized he wasn't there, which is why she was able to cope all this other time, is because she could just pretend he's away on a trip or something like that. And then she was like, I looked around to find any of his belongings. And I remembered that the day after he died, I told people to come and like take all of his stuff away. And it was just like, oh, like that, that's really hard. My father passed away when I was a kid, and getting rid of someone's stuff is like that's just like,
it's really hard.
It's when you have to admit to the world something has changed when you get rid of somebody's stuff, who's passed away. Like that's the admission of, I know this happened. I acknowledge this happened and I'm taking action on it. But if you just leave it there, or if you make it a shrine or something like that, you can pretend like it never happened. And so for her to be so quick to be like, just get rid of all of it, was like, I get that. And also it sucks that now all that stuff is gone and she can't have any of it. And then Troi, sneaky, has kept like a music box from him, then their marriage, their life together. When did she do this? How did she do this? Why did she know it? I don't know. But I thought that was just a brilliant thing to do.
And something a good counselor would understand, a good therapist would understand. And I get the inclination to like remove all of his things, because looking at a partner who's missing or has died or something, looking at their things is really painful. Triggering and painful. So it's like, I'm just going to clean house and get rid of all of his things. But then you're doing that at an emotional time. And like a deeply emotional time in your life is no time to be making like big decisions or big changes, because you're going to feel differently, and you could very well feel differently later on. So now it's 5 months later, and she's like, I looked around for any sign that he had even been here at all, and there was nothing. And I was like, oh my God, like I felt so bad for Ensign Brooks, and just so lovely for Counselor Troi as the movers are like moving shit out. She's like, hold on, let me just take 1 or 2 items and I'll give this back to her when like it feels like the time is right. Yeah. Oh, I loved that.
And it was just really, really sweet. And I actually thought that would have been a good place to do the commercial break.
Yes. Except that we didn't quite get that. So now we're on the bridge, and Worf is like, Captain, sensors detect a large field of something. Wait, now it's gone. And they're like, okay, that's weird. And then Data's like, oh, sensors have detected. Oh, now it's gone again. And so they're like, it's there. It's gone. It's there. It's gone. And if I hadn't seen this episode before, I'd be like, is it a Q thing? Like what is going on?
That is literally what I thought.
Oh, really?
I knew it wasn't a Q episode. But a little bit later, after the commercial break, the ship actually gets stuck, like it gets trapped, it can't move. And I literally was like, oh no, is the Enterprise being kidnapped by Q SpaceNet? Like that's what I wrote in my notes. Even though I know it's not a Q episode, I was like, this feels like the only thing that can stop the ship in space with nothing around is Q.
I mean, I'm really glad that we are past the days of the SpaceNet for sure. But yeah, it did kind of feel like that. Now, the bridge crew are like, we're detecting something. Now it's gone. We're detecting something. Now it's gone. And so now we flash back to Ensign Brooks is saying goodbye to Counselor Troi. And she's like, I'll see you tomorrow. Thank you so much. And I went, daily therapy sessions? Sign me up. Like, if I'm lucky, I can afford my therapist once a week. And that's if I'm lucky. But as they're saying goodbye, Troi is like grasping her head in pain. And as Ensign Brooks walks off, I mean, Troi is like writhing in pain and ends up like collapsing and losing consciousness. And then we cut to credit. And I was like, oh shit, what has happened?
And there's this weird moment before Ensign Brooks leaves where Troi kind of almost like, she doesn't faint, but she kind of has this moment, like a little spell. And Ensign Brooks is like, oh my gosh, are you okay? And she's just like, oh yes, I'm just tired. And then as soon as she walks away and Troi goes back into her office, she like collapses to the ground in pain. And I just thought, why'd she lie about that?
Yeah.
What was
medical emergency to Counselor Troi's office? Boom.
Or even just saying, yeah, my head did hurt, that or something weird just happened. I don't know. It's just a phase, but whatever. Like whatever her thing was, I just was like, why would she lie about that? It actually reminds me of my mom had bought me these really fuzzy slippers one year for Christmas, and they were like the best. She bought me these really fuzzy slippers. And as soon as I put them on, the dog started like tearing them up because they're like, ooh, fuzzy, like this tastes good. Right. And I was like, yeah. And I was like, let me hurry move my slippers. And my mom was like, yeah, the woman at the store told me to be careful if you have dogs, because her dogs love to attack her fuzzy slippers. So she had asked me if I had dogs, and I told her no. And I was like, but mom, you have like 3 dogs. Why did you tell her no?
Why didn't you just say yes?
Why didn't you just say yes? And she was like, because it's none of her business whether or not I have dogs. I was like, are you serious? Like, this is not a state secret. Like, it was a very friendly.
Seems like if you have dogs, you may want to think about getting these, because dogs like going after these. Do you have dogs? Don't you worry about that. What?
So that's what this moment felt like to me, where she was just like, oh no, I'm just tired. It just felt like I don't have dogs. It's none of your business how I'm feeling. Like, you could just be like, yeah, a weird thing just happened. I'm sure it's nothing. I'll see you tomorrow. Like, anyways, that's just a point that stuck with me where I was like, what's the point of the lie? That was like the most useless lie.
That really was. So we're back on the bridge, and sensor diagnostics show that everything is normal. And they're like, okay, everything's cool. And by the way, the solution to this problem and what the problem is at all is so wonderful. It's such great sci-fi writing. So they're like, everything is cool. They attempt to make way back to Beta, which is where they were supposed to be going. And as Picard says engage, the ship gets tossed all around. And they're like, uh-oh. And something is actually now pulling the Enterprise. And they try to break free, but they end up just basically like spinning their wheels and going nowhere. Like, engines are going to overload if we don't shut down. So they're like, all right, just shut it down at this point. Like, you know, so they're stuck, and it does kind of feel Space Netty where it's like, okay, warp 9.9, engage. We're not moving at all. Shit, that's all we had.
Yep.
It's like the most.
Yep. Impulse didn't work. Warp didn't work. Those are the only two things we can do.
The only saucer separation, probably not going to do much. Like,
or one half. Actually, that probably would work, but only for half of the ship. It would get away. The other half would be dragged down by the space wave.
Yes.
Which is what I call it.
Yes. Now, because the Enterprise has been rocked about, people have been sort of tossed around, and Deanna is feeling horrible. She's like, I'm so dizzy. I have this horrible pain. I lost consciousness for a little bit. So she comes over to Dr. Crusher, but Beverly's like, try to lie down and stay still. Like, I'm getting like calls from all over the ship of like sprained ankles and all this stuff. Cause you know, the ship just got bopped all over the place. And this is where I was like, this is why you call for help when you need help, not 3 minutes later.
Yeah. Cause
you could have already been like in sickbay getting
before treated. All this other stuff. And also she just said like, I'm feeling really dizzy. So that's not if in a triage situation, dizziness is not a stop everything and run to your bedside situation.
Yeah, that's not a level one. That's not a level one problem.
Or have broken parts of their bodies. Like, that's going to take precedence over like, I'm just feeling dizzy. So even the way she said it was like, oh, okay, well, you're feeling dizzy, you know, like lie down.
Yeah.
I'll be there when I'm there. Like, it's not. Yeah. So I kind of also felt that too. Like if she was more scared than that, maybe she should have said that, but maybe she wasn't more scared. Maybe she just felt like, oh, that was just weird. I was dizzy, like not a big deal. So who knows?
Yeah. Who knows? Now, at this point, Beverly is able to get to Troi, you know, after she's kind of triaged everything else. And she's like, I just had this, like, I can't really remember what happened. All of a sudden I was in pain and now I feel really dizzy and out of it. I just kind of feel super foggy. And Beverly's like, I don't know. I mean, the tricorder kind of looks like everything looks fine. And Troi starts staring at Beverly like something is very wrong. And at that moment, I believe it's Riker who calls for a senior staff meeting to discuss, like, you know, the situation that they find themselves in with the ship. And Beverly's like, do you need help walking? Like, come on, let's go.
Yeah. Are you feeling up to it? Do you not want to go? And she's like, yeah, I feel up to it. Like, I'm fine.
Okay, let's go. Yeah. And Troi is realizing in this meeting that she's like, something is very wrong. And Picard says, is there a sentience out there? Can you sense anything kind of going out there? And she's like, nothing. Oh my God, I don't feel anything. Like nothing. And Picard's like, it's okay. Like there may not be anything to feel, but that's when she finally is like, no, you don't understand. I don't feel any of you, not out there and not in here. I can't sense anything. Like my empathic abilities are gone. And that is fucking terrifying. Can you imagine suddenly like your sense of hearing or your eyesight, like just disappearing on you out of the blue? And you're like, oh my God, I wasn't planning on this at all.
Yeah. A friend of mine had that happen a few months ago where he had some blood clots develop in his eyes suddenly, but then they went away pretty quickly, like within a couple days, I guess. So it wasn't like permanent eye loss, but I mean, or permanent eyesight loss, but it was sudden, right? It was kind of like a burst blood vessel situation. So it was like, you know, he's just
was he like temporarily blind?
He was temporarily blinded.
Oh
he
my
totally
God.
couldn't see at all. I think it was only one eye that was completely like blocked for a day. And then it got lighter and lighter and lighter. And then now he can see, and he just has like the little floaties in his eyes or whatever, which most people have anyways. But that's part where he's just like going about his day and then boom, couldn't see.
Holy
like,
crap.
Exactly. And he went from like doctor to doctor, from hospital to hospital, be like, I can't see. Like, I don't know what's going on. And that's that is definitely scary. Thankfully for him, it was not some congenital thing or anything like that. It was temporary. But even being temporary, I can imagine that would be really scary and just so different. It's just so different. It's not like my car got in an accident, I'm going to go get it buffed out. It's not like a dent that you can fix. It's like something that you depend on, you rely on every moment of every day that you no longer have access to. And I think it would be very disorienting.
Yes, I agree with you completely on that. Now Beverly is able to take her to sickbay, and she is able to run some deeper scans and says that it looks like there is some brain damage. Your like neural synapses seem to be like blocked in some way. And like you may not regain your, empathic abilities. And this is a Imzadi, like I love this kind of stuff where like Troi is having a very difficult time and Will really comes to like support her and like check with her and just give her some extra love, which she definitely needs right now. And she ends up biting his head off a little bit. And he's like, I'm just here to offer help and support and check in on you. And I noticed that this happens a lot when people offer help to someone who either can't face their problems or won't face their problems or like wish to kind of stay in the state of denial where it's like, but I'm just trying to help. And I'm sorry if like I'm hurting your feelings. And she's like, I don't need you. And like poor Will was like, so, and I understand why she felt the way she did. Cause she's like, my abilities may come back or they may not. Life goes on. I'll adapt, which is true. She would, but even if you logically know that that's the sequence of events that will take place, that doesn't mean that you're okay with it because she never wanted her empathic abilities to leave her.
Yeah. And then also when Beverly is kind of scanning her and talking to her, Troy's like, okay, there's been brain damage, but neurons can regrow. So maybe the damage will be repaired. Great. So it'll just, betazoid brains are very resilient. They can heal themselves. It's going to be totally fine. And Beverly mentions like, yes, but you're also half human. So we don't know how that's going to actually affect your brain's development or healing. And she's like, I don't want to give you false hope. And Troi just kind of snaps at her and is like, it's just hope, Beverly. It's not false. It's like you're trying to take all of my hope away altogether, which I thought was a good point, that you can have hope without it being false hope. Like that is a good point. And at the same time, it was so clear that she was in denial because there was no emotional response. She wasn't like, at that moment, she wasn't like, oh my gosh, like this is really, for however long this lasts, this is going to be so different. And this is really, it was just like, well, it'll just come back. My brain will just heal and everything will be fine. Yeah. And it's like, maybe, but maybe not. So, and Beverly even says, normally I would tell you to go talk to Counselor Troi. That would be my response to you because this is kind of a big moment. And Troy's just like, nope, I'll be fine. Even that, like, I'm not going to need any emotional support. I'm going to be just fine. And then when, as you said, when Riker comes to visit her later in her quarters, she totally bites his head off and is just like, get out of my life. I don't need you or anything and all this stuff. And I've seen that a lot. Like when my dad passed away, which I just mentioned, that was exactly my mom's reaction to my aunt who came down to help clean up, take all the stuff out, all that stuff.
Of course.
Which I didn't remember because I was in my own world of grief. But my aunt told me recently, like, yeah, that's exactly what your mom did to me. She told me, get out of here. I don't need you. I don't need any help from you, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, that is the opposite of the truth. Yeah. That is the exact opposite of what we need right now.
And you can't really knock that sense into somebody who is in denial. Like denial is its own cloud that nobody can be shaken out of. It's like the one thing you cannot convince somebody out of.
Yeah. It's kind of like a fuse, right? You just have to wait for it to burn out. However long that fuse is, there's no shortchanging it.
Yeah. No, absolutely. There's no shortcut out of denial. And don't I wish there were? Cause like, then you could face like your problems that you're facing, like more honestly and like kind of upfront wise, like, but this is just like, she's just in denial and it's just going to last as long as it's going to last. Now, meanwhile, Data and Geordi are configuring the sensors to discover that they are being pulled in the wake of these two-dimensional life forms, which I think is such a freaking cool concept. They are essentially being dragged along on this wake that's only like the like as wide as a sheet of paper. That's why the sensors were not able to detect it. And then they detected and then it went away, because if you're looking right along its axis, it disappears. But then if you look just a little bit like 5 degrees up from its axis, then you see it again. And they're being totally pulled. And they're like, okay, maybe we can do this like forced warp jump to try to break free. Let's maybe try to like jump to warp and maybe that'll kind of disrupt it enough and we can get out of it. And Jordy just very offhand says, it's too bad we can't tell if they're sentient or not. And Troi is like, what is that supposed to mean? I'm doing the best that I can. I was like, oh, girl, I don't think you're in a position to be coming to like work meetings right now.
Seriously. Because by the way, nobody was even talking about you or thinking about you.
Yes.
So you're way too sensitive to be in this room right now.
This is exactly what this is though, where it's like, she thinks that she's okay to work and she's not. And when you're in that position, you make everything about you when it's really not. So Troi, I love you, girl, in this episode, but nobody was talking about you. And I love that Picard was like, when she said, I'm doing the best I can, Picard said, nobody suggested otherwise. And then she like gets up and storms out. Like Picard was like, counselor, can I see you? And she's like, bam, 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 bam.
Yeah,
like
she's
stomping
huffed out. This is the episode of the stomping because Troi like masters her model stomp walk for sure in this episode. Cause she does it every other scene. Just parking on this 2-dimensional organism for a second. What an interesting concept. I love the idea of the 2-dimensional organism in 3D space.
So cool. Yep.
Yeah. That's like somehow the Enterprise got caught inside of this living wave. So they're getting dragged along. And it's just so interesting. There was actually an episode of Futurama where they end up going to a 2-dimensional world. But that it looks more like a cartoon. Where they're in like, I mean, it is a cartoon. Futurama is a cartoon. But when
I was like, wait, what?
But when they go into the 2-dimensional world, it's more like a comic book, but drawn by like a 5-year-old.
I see. Okay. Yeah. It's all flat.
It's all flat. And it's really funny because as they're trying to escape, they can't walk past each other because there's no dimensions or where they can go around each other. So they have to walk in a straight line. It's just like, it's really hilarious. But as I was watching this, I was like, oh my gosh, I bet you the inspiration for that episode was this episode of this 2-dimensional, like running into 2-dimensional creatures in space or whatever. I just thought that was really, really interesting. And this is right up there with the crystalline entity as far as something that's it's just so unearthly that I really appreciate the imagination going on with this life form.
I do think it's super cool too. And we haven't seen anything like this in Star Trek, like a 2-dimensional life form that is existing in a 3-dimensional universe. Like it's just such a really cool concept. I feel like somebody had to be tripping pretty hard on some magical drugs to like come up with this concept. But you know what? I applaud the effort because it's such a neat concept. I never would have thought of that. And yeah, imagine the ship is being dragged on a piece of paper, on top of a piece of paper. And it's like, you can't break free from that piece of paper. And I was like, but have you guys tried turning left or up or down?
That's what I thought. I was like, it's a ship that can like move in 360 degrees.
Rotate 90 degrees downwards and just go down. But I think they're just sort of caught in it and there's really no movement. Yeah. Or up or down.
I agree with you. I think they're caught in it. I think there is no movement. They can't go left or right or up or down. I think they're just being dragged along. Which is fascinating. And Picard's just kind of throughout the episode, they're kind of like, oh, these, this is interesting. Like maybe we should study them. We should get some science team out here just to figure out what's going on with these creatures. Like they're kind of like, at this point, it's mildly interesting and like mildly annoying maybe because they're still trying to get away.
Correct. Yeah. At this point, you're right. It's like, they're kind of like floating on a lazy river and it's like, okay, like you're just going through space. Like there's lots of time to sort of figure this out. Now, Troi goes stomping over to Beverly to figure out what happened. And she's like, Beverly, I can't do my job. I have like patients I have to see and I have to be able to sense them. And Beverly's like, okay, I told you I would look into this. And I did. And it looks like for right now, there's like nothing I can do. And Troi really flies into a rage. And this is one of the few times we ever see two characters having interpersonal conflict, going against the gene law. But Troi is like, you should have helped me faster. And like, if it were me, like I wouldn't have just left you passed out on the floor of your office while I was running around treating scraped knees, and like storms off. And you know what? I have a blended family, but whenever I see somebody stomping around like that, because I'm half Hispanic, I'm like, oh, they're walking in Spanish. It's like stomp, 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 like, and just stomping away. And I was like, she stomps out of that meeting in Spanish, and she stomps in and out of sick day in Spanish. Like she's got the heated attitude. And poor Beverly is like, I understand that it's a stage of loss, is anger, but poor Beverly is doing the best she can, and she didn't deserve it. And Troi had every right to feel angry, and she's angry at the loss. She's not angry at Beverly having to treat other people first before coming to her. But like,
and even if Beverly would have come first, it would have done absolutely nothing.
It wouldn't have done anything anyway. But like,
and then she would have still been mad at Beverly. She would have been like, well, you should have figured it out faster, and you should have fixed it faster.
It is creating situations to be upset over so that you can justify being upset. And that's absolutely what Troi is doing. And I felt so bad. Beverly's face was like, what just happened?
And it's like she totally ruined Beverly's day. I mean, hopefully Beverly was just a professional and was like, well, she's going through some things and went on with her day. But like, imagine you're just sitting there doing your job, like looking at cells, picking up tissue cultures, whatever. And then someone
blue liquid, red liquid.
Yeah. And someone walks in and then just like bites your head off and then storms out. And now you're having a horrible day because you feel totally like guilty or blamed or something.
Yeah.
And you were just kind of like going about your day 5 minutes ago. And now you're feeling all these big emotions that someone literally came and just dropped them on you and then left.
Yeah. Poor Beverly. She didn't deserve any of that.
That was pretty messed up, Troi. That's how we know all these things. This is how we know you need to stay in your quarters for a little bit. You don't need to be exposing all of that to anybody else.
No. There's an Instagram, like there's an influencer on social media that I see from time to time. And she's usually like spewing a bunch of like positivity stuff that's like really great. But one of the things she has said, and it became like such a catchphrase of her, where she's like, have an amazing day. And if you can't have an amazing day, don't you dare go ruining it for anybody else. And I was like, yes, Troi, I'm seriously going at you for this. Like, I'm sorry you're having a rough day, and don't take it out on anybody else. Don't go ruining anybody else's day because you're having a shitty time. Well, she decides she needs a timeout, and she goes to resign from her position as ship's counselor, which is like too far.
A permanent timeout. Yeah.
Too far. And this is what happens though. When you're really upset, you go into these drastic measures where you're like, I need an hour to cool down. And then when you get upset, you're like, I need 5,000 hours. And you're like,
that's when it's like, I'm moving to Tuscany to live in like some little villa and pick grapes or something. You're like, maybe you just need a vacation. Like, I don't know if all that, like, no,
let's start with a week and then we'll see how we feel. Okay.
Like, do you speak the language? Like, I think we need to think about this a little bit more, but right. When you're in that situation where the grief is so overwhelming, you just want to get out of it as fast as possible, and drastic measures in our minds, it seems like that's what's going to get us out of it. So she's just going to resign her place in Starfleet, leave her whole life behind, and start over as a question mark. We don't have a plan. There's no plan here. Is she going to a star base? Does she realize the ship's being sucked into like a cosmic string or whatever? Like, there's no plan here. She's just like, I don't like what's going on with me, so I quit.
Yeah. So she absolutely is like, I don't like the situation I'm in, so I'm going to leave the entire situation. And you're like, except that your problems are going to follow you, girl. Like, your empathic abilities aren't coming back if you just like quit being counselor. And Troi is really trying to keep it together with Picard. He's like, when somebody loses one sense, the other senses become stronger to compensate. And she's like, she basically very politely is like, well, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. And you're just trying to give me platitudes to make me feel better, and just accept what I'm saying, that I'm leaving, and that's it. And he's like, I had a friend in the academy who lost his leg in a silly putty accident. And like, and she's like, stop. I want to leave. So Will, of course, is very tuned into her. So he comes to see her, because obviously Picard is like, Will, come here. Guess what? Counselor Troi just quit, right? So he goes to see her, and she really does break down with him. And it's nice to see her just being sad, because anger is sadness plus the ability to like take action, right? Where sadness is just, I'm just sad. There's nothing for me to do about it than just to be sad. And she really breaks down. And at some point he's like, I think what you're really upset about is that now you're on equal footing with other humans. You always had this like empathic ability over me in our relationship and over all of us. And like, now you're on the same footing. Now you have to run on like instinct and your gut feeling, and you have to take what I'm saying at face value, and you can't be like searching for a deeper meaning in all of this. And he's like, I think there was always something a little too aristocratic about your Beta Z heritage. I think that's what's really upsetting you. And I was like, well, maybe a little too soon, buddy. Like,
Yeah.
too
But I think
soon.
everything he said was true. And
Yes.
I think it was too soon. And I think it was a bit much because he kept going. I think he could have just stopped with the, like, I think it's a control issue. That could have been like that subtle touch, I think would be plenty right now for her to be like, no, it's not really.
How dare you?
And for her to be like, well, maybe it is a little bit. Like, I think that would have been enough. But he went to like, and then also you're so snobby and you don't like your half human side and da 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 da. And the other thing about you, it's like, all right. Like
that blue dress does make your butt look big. Okay,
yeah,
too much, too soon.
But in any case, she did need to hear that. And I didn't think about that. But when he said it, I was like, that's exactly what it is. I mean, it's losing an ability she's used her whole life. So it's bigger than that. But also part of it is like, yeah, now she doesn't have control over the situation. She doesn't have a secret little edge. She has to take what people say at face value. And if you had the ability to know if people are lying to you or not, and now you don't, that is a huge loss of control. That's a huge, I mean, that's her big thing that she was used for all of season 1 was like, in negotiations, are our enemies lying or not? That's a huge like tool in her tool belt to just not have. And for people to just say something to her and she doesn't know if they're telling the truth or not, you know, like the rest of us. But for her to be in that situation, that is a huge loss of power.
That is, of course it is. It's like having a lie detector test strapped to people that you talk to all day long. And then suddenly the lie detector test is gone and you're like, well, shit, now I can't be for sure that you're not lying. It's like, yeah, like the rest of us.
And I do have to say this time, because I actually made a point to put this in my notes, is that her tears in this scene with Riker are totally appropriate in this situation.
Yes.
Like, this is the time. If if you're listening and you remember season 1, Troi, she cried almost every single episode for any reason.
Yeah.
Like the
literally anything.
Yeah. Like the stars are so beautiful. There's no more chocolate ice cream. Like anything. And it was just like, girl, like everything's not that dramatic.
Mm-hmm.
But here, this scene where she's boohoo crying is the exact appropriate time for her to cry. Her tears fit here so perfectly. Like,
yes,
the fact that she didn't cry until this point was the distressing part. You're kind of like, when is she gonna actually be sad about this loss? And then when she breaks down, you're like, okay, she's human. There we go.
If this was season 1, if this episode was in season 1, Ensign Brooks would have been talking about what a great job she's doing, not dealing with her grief. And Counselor Troi would have been like biting her pillow and crying, just like, where it's like, no. This is not the time. You're right. This is absolutely when one it's expected to be crying. Like,
right. And if she would have cried this whole episode long, I would have been like, yep.
Yeah. And this is why I actively like her, because this woman is dealing with a real loss. Now, I will say, Marina Sirtis, who plays Counselor Troi, has said that she has gotten so much feedback about this episode from members of the disabled community for any disability, where they're like, oh my God, we're feeling like we're represented even in a short span here. And it was actually sort of, the idea was thrown about in the writer's room to make this loss of her empathic abilities permanent. So she would have to like learn to like really develop without them, which I was like, God, that would have been really interesting. But yeah, she said that like disabled people have come up to her left and right to say like this episode just made them feel like seen and heard. And I was like, oh, I think that that's really lovely. Now Riker has to take a break from bashing Troi to her face because they're going to try this controlled warp jump, and they try it and it doesn't move at all. But Data did pick up that during the jump attempt, the life form showed like a very slight differentiation in its pattern, but then it returned back to normal almost immediately. So Picard is like, listen, we need to like break out of this. So like follow up on that lead and kind of look into it and let me know.
Yeah. And use the universal translator. Maybe there's some way we can communicate with them with movement, light beams, something.
Anything. And then when, Shereese, when you really want to be left alone, the one place you go is to 10 forward to have a drink. And
that's where everybody goes who wants to be left alone. Yeah, that's exactly what we see when Ensign Ro joins the crew in a couple seasons. Yeah. She's like, I hate people, I hate everybody, I hate everything. So I'm going to 10 forward where there's always tons of people. And
Guinan's like, you could just use your own replicator to like have a cup of tea in your quarters
or
alone.
Anything. Yeah,
or seriously anything.
Which is why Guinan's always like, if you're here, you clearly don't want to be alone. You want me to come over and sit and chat with you.
Which is what she does. And Guinan has a wonderful way of getting to the point where she's like, I heard that you're resigning and I'm sorry about that. I'm going to talk to Captain Picard. And Troy's like, wait, why? She's like, well, because you're leaving. So there's an opening for a ship's counselor. And Guinan kind of has that like roundabout way for Troi to recognize like, yeah, it's not just your empathic abilities. That's what makes you a counselor. Like most, and Picard does say this earlier in the episode, most captains have human ship's counselors like that just rely on like their training and their instinct. Like you've had a leg up this whole time, but
you still have lots of skills. And she was not hearing that. She was like, I'm disabled and you don't know what you're talking about. And let me out of here.
Yeah.
So he was not.
She almost airlocked herself. She really did.
She really did. But Guinan had and there's been time when she was able to cry with Riker. So she's in a different spot emotionally. And then Guinan has her Guinan touch to be like, yeah, I think I would make an amazing ship's counselor, which by the way, she would and is. So yes, I think yes.
I mean, I think Troi is I actively think that she's really great at this point, but man, I still think Guinan's better.
I do too. And that's okay. We can have more than one really talented counselor on board.
It's over 1,000 people on this ship. Can't we have 2 great counselors?
Right. We apparently have more than one doctor, which is great. So I think we could have more than one counselor.
They're still searching for Dr. Hill and Dr. Salar. They're nowhere to be found.
I know. But we love Dr. Salar.
Yeah.
So she's having this whole conversation and basically Guinan reverse psychologies her into arguing why actually Troi is such a great counselor. And she's like, but there's this, but there's that, but there's that, and there's this. And then she goes, I know what you're doing. And Guinan's like, what am I doing? And she's like, you're trying to trick me into thinking that I can still be the counselor.
You're trying to psychology me.
Yeah. And Guinan's like, did I give you any indication of that? Did my words at all give you the idea that I'm not being 100% sincere? And she's like, well, no, but I could just tell. I could just tell from my instinct. I can just tell. And she's like, oh, interesting. Instinct, huh? And you're just like, oh, Guinan's so great. And
She's so great.
Like, okay,
fine.
Maybe I'll unquit.
Yeah. Let me beam over. Let me site-to-site transport to the ready room and rescind my resignation offer. Yeah. So
what an awkward position for Picard to be in too. Does he accept her resignation because she's very vehement about accepting it? Does he put it on pause for a little bit until she comes back to her senses? Like, I mean, right now they have other fish to fry, but just thinking about that situation where you've got a person who you work with who is in terrible grief and wants to make this big change.
Yeah.
How do you support them best? Do you just let them go? Do you not let them go? Do you try to fight them on it? What do you do? I think it's a really difficult position to be in. And that's when it sucks to be a leader. Moments like that.
I think it really does. Now, things start to really ratchet up in this episode because, they were playing Christopher Cross's Sailing, as they were just drifting along on this 2-dimensional being.
Mm-hmm.
However, now sensors indicate that the life form seems to be drifting toward this cosmic string fragment, which is this beautiful purple smoky ribbon on the view screen. The thing that bothers me about this is Riker says a cosmic string fragment has the gravitational force of a black hole, but it's only as wide as a proton. But that ribbon is like 12 Enterprises wide. It's so effing big. And I'm like, I get for the visual, for the audience to see that. But I was like, you didn't need to tell us it was super thin because you can clearly see it's not. But it's basically like moth to a flame. Like these beings are just drifting towards it. And because it has the gravitational force of a black hole, the Enterprise is going to just be crushed in like 7 hours. So now we have a countdown.
Mm-hmm. And I agree. When he said that, I was like, wait, I almost wanted to rewind it. I was like, didn't he just say it was like a micron thick? You can't see that. This thing is like, this thing is bigger than the Enterprise. It's like wider and longer than the Enterprise, and it's taller than the Enterprise. It's like 7 Enterprises tall.
Yeah.
So I think we can still call it could be that big and we can still call it a string. Yeah. On the cosmic scale of things.
Because it's a made up phrase anyway, so it doesn't even matter.
For one, it's made up. But for two, the scale of space, the scale of the galaxy, you could have a big giant thing in space and still call it relatively a string compared to all of space. So I feel like they didn't need to like go into the detail of describing the thickness of an actual string, like on Earth, like a piece of thread, because that visual didn't match at all and didn't make any sense. But I thought, like, wow, a cosmic string, like what a cool idea.
Yes. 2-dimensional beings and cosmic strings. This is like amazing science in science fiction.
This is a fun sci-fi episode. And I was like, this is super neat, except the deathy part. That makes the string less fun, but like so cool. Like we never have heard of this before. I don't think we ever hear about it again. So I really like that.
No, but we do see quantum filaments, which sound very, very similar, but also, A+ to the writers, by the way, for this episode. I mean, not only do you have Troi being actually interesting for once, but you've got this really great sci-fi as well. So it's amazing.
Yeah.
Now,
and I will agree with that. Troi has a lot of depth in this episode.
She really does. She's a real person and not just like a Barbie. Now, of course, they're like, oh shit, we're all going to be crushed in just a couple of hours. So like options. And they decide to fire torpedoes.
Worf says, shoot them.
Yeah.
That's his first option. And I was like, you know what, Worf, way to stick to your guns, because this has not changed since season 1 back with Yar. Q pops up on the bridge and they're like, shoot him.
Shoot it.
It's like always, you see the Borg, shoot him. And like, totally. You're the chief of security for a reason. So when he's like, I think we should just shoot him, and Picard's like, well, should we destroy this unique life form just, to save ourselves? Is there another way, maybe a win-win solution where no one has to get killed?
Yeah.
And he's like,
I guess we can fire torpedoes in front of it and see if it disrupts them.
Yeah. It's like, I think we should just shoot them in the face. And you're like, is there any other way we could warn them instead of shooting them in the face? I guess we could shoot in the air. It's like, that was your second choice. Your first was shoot them in the face. And I felt like that's what this was, which is so funny.
He's a shoot first, ask questions later kind of guy. And this is a shoot first, ask questions, shoot further ahead. That's what we came up with. So they're like, fine. So they shoot in front of this span and nothing has changed. No directional change, nothing. So then Picard was like, well, fuck. Okay, I guess we'll shoot him in the face. And they do. And nothing happens. And it's like, oh, crap. Now, I feel
like, well, I'm out of ideas. That's all I got. Shoot him in the face is all I got. If that didn't stop him, I don't know what to do.
I don't know. Q, can you help us?
Yeah, we tried running away really fast. We tried running away really slow. We tried shooting in the air. We tried shooting in the face. That's all I got. Now. Like running or shooting. We have
Everybody
no
go to your
here.
Quarters and make some peace because we've got 7 hours to count down
before
here.
We hit this string.
Yeah, that's about it. I don't know what else to say. So Deanna is packing up her office and
with
Ensign
the coolest
Brooks,
looking pads ever. Did you see
Oh
those?
my god, just stacks of pads and a really cool little briefcase.
So cool.
So fucking cool. I want everything in that office.
Agreed.
So she's packing up her office when Ensign Brooke comes by and she's like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I meant to cancel our appointment. I've actually resigned as ship's counselor. I've lost my empathic abilities. I can't really. And Ensign Brooks is like, no, you may not have empathic abilities, but you used your instinct to work with Ensign Brooks, whose first name I think is Janet. And Janet's like, you used your instinct and you helped. Like, you may not have this empathic ability right now or anymore, but you still helped me a lot, because what we had kind of skipped over was there was a second session where Janet was like, oh my God, guess what? I cried my eyes out last night and I woke up feeling so much better and I've done it. I've done grief.
I'm healed.
And woo! Again, Janet has missed the mark by about 1.5 miles. And it's like, and
she's
Troi
missed it by a cosmic string length.
Just 1 micron and also 7 enterprises wide for some reason. If you really missed it by a cosmic strings width, then that's actually very, very close. But by the way that they visually represent it, you're off by about 2 star systems, God damn it. So the shit that comes out of my mouth, I swear to God.
It's so great. So great.
Thanks. But, Troi had said, like, look, I may not be able to help you very much. I've lost my empathic abilities. Right. And this is when Janet's like, well, I cried last night and I woke up feeling better. So I've gotten all my grief out, which I think in this day and age, still people think if you break down and you have a good cry, everything is better afterwards. And it's like, no, that is true to a certain extent. After you're done with that one cry, that does not mean that like everything is healed now. Like it's probably going to take a lot of cries to get past whatever it is that you're dealing with. So, Troi had said, like, I don't have my empathic sense, so I can't sense if you're being truthful or not. But what I can tell you is that doesn't kind of sound right.
She said one night of crying is not going to erase months of denial.
Yeah.
And Janet says, well, I'm telling you.
Wrong.
Yeah, she says, well, I'm telling you, it did. It absolutely did. And you are wrong, Troi. You are just so completely wrong.
Yeah, she's like, let's get some more people in here to say the word wrong again. Like, you are dead wrong. You couldn't be more wrong.
In the like most chipper, like upbeat way. You are completely 100% totally wrong.
Are you wrong?
Yeah.
Super wrong. You couldn't be more wrong.
Poor Troi is already feeling like maybe I'm not doing this well. And then to hear that, she's just like, okay. And that was kind of the final nail in the coffin that made her quit. So now as Ensign Brooks is coming back and she's like, remember our last session? That's why I'm quitting, because I can't help you. I was so wrong with what you're feeling. And Ensign Brooks is like, no, you were actually right. I was still in denial.
You're wrong about how wrong you were. I was wrong. And Troy's like, stop saying wrong. Okay. Stop saying the word wrong. It's very triggering. Her word cloud for that day would just be wrong in like 1,000 point font. Yeah. So she does talk to her and she's like, I was doing it again though. I was in denial again. And like you use your instinct. And it was really helpful. Like you use your instinct and like your years of training, and you actually really helped me a lot. And now I kind of have a better sense of like, I'm just kind of living one day at a time, processing the grief and the loss of my husband, like, which makes sense. So Picard has to call Troi and he's like, look, we have like 6.5 hours left before we're destroyed. I know that despite the loss of your empathic ability, you're still the best person for the job, which sounded a lot like Future Imperfect from 2 weeks ago. Remember where they're like, Riker, despite the fact that you have remembered the last 16 years, you're still the best person for the job to negotiate this treaty that you have no memory of. It's like,
And we're like, that can't be right.
That doesn't check out. He's wrong. Right. But in this case, he was actually right, where it's like, yeah, everybody has tried everything. We tried Geordi's method, which is running away. We tried Worf's method, which is shooting. Now we need to try your method, because Riker is over here just like, being Captain Morgan all over all the comms and stuff, but like not actually giving us anything. And so Troi and Data start talking and she's like, I'm sorry. I just feel really lost without my instinct. Like,
which I love this conversation because, and at this point, like, for some reason, there were 5 hours before destruction when Troi talked to Picard and he said, I want you to go brainstorm with Data. Now she's in the room brainstorming with Data and there's 1 hour left. So it took her 4 hours to get over to the observation lounge. I don't know what she had a lot of packing to do.
I did not catch that at all. Did she have to go unpack all her pads and put them all back on the shelf?
Yeah, I was like, what is going on? Because it's like, well, we have 1 hour left and they literally just started their conversation. So what was going on these last 4 hours?
I want to see a deleted scenes of Data standing in the observation lounge, looking at the doors, waiting for her, and we see her like
playing.
Yes, and she's eating a chocolate sundae, and then she's packing, and then changing her outfit, and then brushing her hair, and then unpacking, and then like, and then
I feel like this is like a Lower Decks episode. That's what
I thought. Yep. In my mind, I saw Counselor Troi and Data, but cartoon as Lower Decks. Yeah, and then she's like popping into transporter rooms to be like, "Hey, what's going on in here?" And then somebody is like, "Aren't you supposed to be in the observation lounge?" And she's like, "Oh shit, that's right." And yeah, it's been 4 hours.
And the ship is going to be destroyed in 1. Yeah. So at this point, we have 1 hour left, and Troi and Data are brainstorming what they could do. And
I did not catch that at all.
I was like, wait, what? And so Troy's saying
like 30 feet apart, like the ready room and the
like
observation
in the
lounge.
It's that next door on the other side of the bridge. It's right there. So I don't know she took the long way. She took the Jeffries tubes to get there. But they're talking
like and passing by the nacelles and shit, like really like, oh, hey, Geordi, don't mind me. All right. The wheels are coming off now. As it usually does when we talk track.
So they're talking and Data is just like, and I love that she's talking to Data because everything she's complaining about, all the other humans have been like, you will adapt, you will manage, like you will find another way. There is hope. There's a future for you. Don't give up. Like being very positive, which I would imagine if I lost an arm or a leg or something like that, that's what people around me would say too. It's like, you're going to, I know you're mad and you just want to be mad for a while, but eventually you will adapt and everything else.
Yeah.
Data, on the other hand, will never adapt and he can never understand. So I love that she's complaining to him about stuff that he wishes he could complain about, right? She's just like, I've lost my empathic ability and I don't have, I don't know how to draw on my human instincts. And he's like, well, since I don't have any human instincts, I can't guide you. I don't know either. And I just thought like, you're complaining about a loss of an ability that's still light years beyond what Data's capable of.
Yeah.
And his goal to be human. So it's a little bit kind of like that old saying of like, I pitied the man with no shoes until I met the man with no feet or something like that.
Yes.
Saying like, I was complaining because I didn't have shoes and then I met a man with no feet. And I was like, okay, well, it could be worse. And that's not how this scene is written. It's not written as like, Troi, you should feel good about what you still have. It's not like that. But I just thought that when I was watching, like, wow, like this is a perfect person to talk to because Data's not going to give you any platitudes because he doesn't even know them and they don't mean anything to him. He's just going to listen to you and be like, yeah, same.
Data is the last person I expected her to be talking to throughout this episode, but he's actually the perfect person to talk with her about this, especially after she spent 4 hours getting to the observation lounge. God damn it, Troi, wasting a bunch of time. But she does say, like, I feel like all I have is instinct. And even like my instinct doesn't feel like it's working. But then she was like, wait a minute. What if these life forms are just instinctual, like a moth to a flame? She did say like horses have been known to run into burning barns, which I always thought they ran out of, but I didn't. If anybody knows,
they run out of it when they're in it, when it catches fire. But if it catches fire and they're on the outside, that's so interesting. But it does. My friend was telling me, because he used to work at medieval times, that the horses will run into their stables because they're prey. So being in a nice little confined space is like safety. Yes. So when they feel scared or, tired or whatever, they'll run into their area. So I guess I could understand that if the barn is on fire and that scares them, they might run into their
because
room
they want to go into their stall
to run into their stall to like be safe. And so, but I honestly didn't know that horses ran into burning barns. I never heard that.
That is interesting. For those of you who don't know, medieval times is like, it's like an amusement park dinner theater show where there's like horses and people dress up as knights and they have like fake battles and you can eat a bunch of greasy food with your hands. And it's like a great time when you're a kid. Yeah, and then I took my niece and nephew there when I was like an adult and I was like, oh, this is like not awesome. However, as a kid, I was like, oh my God. Cause then you get to sit in like colored areas. So then like, if you're in the red area, then you cheer for the red knight and you boo for like
all the other ones,
the yellow knight or whatever the hell. Yeah. So it was really, really fun. Yeah. I never knew anybody who ever worked there. I always wondered about that. Cause like animal husbandry and everything is like, has to be such a big part of your job. Anyway.
Yeah. This was just totally random. A friend of mine was like, oh yeah, I used to work there. And it was like, what?
Who works at a fucking Knights of the Round Table dinner show?
The dinner show was great. I think he gave lots of children happiness. So that was a good call on him for however long he worked there. But as she's talking and explaining this to Data, the reason she's explaining it is because Data's like, he says, I assumed that they didn't know that they're moving towards the string, that it's just pulling them in with the gravitational pull. They're unaware that it's dangerous. They don't realize it. And Troi is like, why do you think they wouldn't realize it's dangerous? And he's just like, no living creature would actively put themselves in harm's way. They just wouldn't do it. Like, it just doesn't make sense. And that's when Troi says moths fly into flames all the time. They're drawn to it and it actually hurts them and can kill them.
It's stimulus. Yeah. It's a stimulus response.
It's a stimulus response. It's beyond, is this safe or not safe? It's just, there's a thing there and I want to go see what that thing is. And that thing kills you. Right. Yep. So then Data's like, oh shoot. This whole time I've been thinking that they just were unaware, but what if it's just a thing in space and they're like, cool, a thing in space and they're all running towards it. Now we're kind of screwed. And so that gets Troi on this track of like, maybe it's just instincts. And if it is just instincts and they're just moving towards a flame, maybe we can make another flame, a simulated flame that's going to allow them to stop dragging us towards the string. So long enough for us to escape, which I thought was a genius idea.
Absolutely. And so they end up simulating the harmonics of the string. And they're like, maybe the beings will shift their direction. And as they do, the Enterprise could break free. It'll kind of break that bond that they have or the field and they can break free. And they end up beginning using this harmonic resonance. They use the deflector shield.
And at this point we have 3 minutes, by the way.
Yeah. And so they begin the harmonic resonance and they're like, it's not quite enough. Let's turn up the volume. And they do. And the sound effect, I don't know how the, audio sound effect department did this, but it sounded so cool. And I totally believed it. It was like this like very jerky, dissonant kind of sound. It was really cool. And so the beings start to shift away from the cosmic fragment. And as that change happens, the Enterprise is finally able to break free.
And at this point, there are 3 seconds when they break free.
Yes. And they break free and the 2-dimensional beings.
You guys can't see me because you're listening, but I'm rolling my eyes at that.
Yes. She's rolling her eyes hard.
So unnecessary. We had 5 hours that went down to 1 hour. To 3 minutes to 3 seconds. Y'all could have done this 4.5 hours ago. It doesn't need to be so down to the wire.
But that's what the fun is. Well, can you imagine from the show where they're like, what if we try this? Oh, it worked.
They tried a bunch of things that didn't work.
Yeah. That's what the show is. Like, it's always down to the wire. But anyway, they end up doing it at the last second because it's Star Trek. And the beings shift away from the string and that enables the Enterprise to get away. And as the Enterprise gets away, they turn off their deflector shield and the beings shift back into the string. Now, as they're going back into the string and being like destroyed or whatever the fuck, Troi kind of collapses and she's like, oh my God, my empathic abilities are back. And she's able to sense that the 2-dimensional beings, they wanted to be there. The string does not damage them because they're not 3-dimensional beings. They're flat. So gravitational pull is meaningless to them. Right. It's like the like crushing gravitational.
They can't be crushed.
The crushing gravity. Yes. The crushing gravity of the string, they can't be crushed. It's like trying to crush a flat piece of paper flatter, like nothing happens. So Troi is back. The beings are where they wanted to be. And then Deanna does a shipwide apology tour to apologize to Beverly and then to Will and then to fucking Guinan and then to Picard. And then she calls up, Wesley and apologizes to him because she probably fired off an angry email or something. Right. And then all is well. And that's the end of our episode. Final thoughts.
My final thought was I'm going to give this episode a skip in the future. It just did not resonate with me. I love that there was depth for Troi. Like this being a Troi episode, this did right by her, because the other Troi heavy episodes were her just being like manipulated by skeezy men, or like being, a pledge to marry from childhood to some random super hot doctor who was in love with someone else, or like being kidnapped by Ferengi with her mom, like just weird episodes. And at least this one was legit. It made her a three-dimensional person. She had depth.
Unlike the floating beings who had no depth whatsoever.
Exactly. That was a nice juxtaposition there. They made her three-dimensional for a change because they introduced a two-dimensional being so they could actually mix it up, differentiate. So I do think it was a good Troi episode, but I just didn't connect with it. So I'm probably going to give it a skip in the future. But overall, I'm going to say good job, writers. Thank you for making Troi more than a piece of paper.
Yes. I think that you're absolutely right. This episode, it's slightly ironic that Troi had depth while these creatures had no depth whatsoever, literally. But I think that I really, really like what we see as like going through the stages of loss or being emotional. We're like, oh, she's being very human, which is ironic as well, because she had lost her Beta Z side and really truly was human. And this is the first time we see her being just a real human, and what any of us would have experienced. I would have stormed over to Beverly and yelled at her for not coming to me faster, even though I know that wouldn't have made a lick of difference in like the loss of my abilities. Right. So I think that this is so far for me, the best Troi episode, because she's a real person.
Definitely.
Totally a real person. I like that she is snappy with her peers, which we never see, according
and especially
to
her too. She's not really a snappy bite your head off type of person. She's not a snappy person.
Ensign Rowe is a snappy person, but Deanna, not so much. I love the science fiction of this. I love two-dimensional beings. I love being trapped in their wake. I love the cosmic string. I don't like how they said it was super narrow, but it was really very wide. So whatever the fuck with that. But like that aside, I really, really like this episode. So next week, we are talking a data-heavy episode, Shereese, so that should be fun. We're going to be talking Season 4, Episode 11, Data's Day. Thank you guys so much for listening. We'll see you next week.
Bye. Thanks for geeking out with us. Be sure to join the crew at thetngpodcast.com to be the first to know when we do our live shows or host events exclusively for our members. We'll see you next time.